we can't even give you any snippets. We can't even give you any lyrics. We can't give you anything because nothing exists. But what I can tell you is that this is such an amazing score. And it feels very different to like what's currently on Broadway. Hi everyone, and welcome back to After Broadway, the podcast where we deep dive into anything and everything musical theater. I'm Tara.
I'm Stefania.
And in today's episode, we're talking about Gatsby, an American myth. Okay, Steph. What do you want to say off the top here? What day did we see this?
We saw this on June 29th because, as we know, this is an out-of-town tryout. So if this ever ends up going to have another production somewhere, whether that's Broadway or anywhere else, the version that we've seen is not necessarily the version that's going to make it to other productions. It might not even be the version, if you saw this today, that you would see. It is very much a musical still in development. So we saw it on June 29th, the matinee performance. And what we're going to talk about is, what we saw on that day. But the next production, you might be like, that song wasn't there. And we'll be like, I don't know what to tell you.
Go ahead.
Even, we're going to talk about the previous Gatsby that we saw that's currently playing on Broadway, but we also only saw the out-of-town tryout, which we definitely know has changed from the date that we saw it. So our comparison is kind of interesting because it's out-of-town to out-of-town tryout, this like in development kind of transient phase that both of these musicals were in.
Yeah. Also, for the sake of this, we will be calling the other Gatsby like the Broadway Gatsby because that's the one that's on Broadway currently.
Excuse me, both of their Twitter handles or their Instagram handles are Broadway Gatsby or Gatsby Broadway.
Well, I think they just put that, they got that handle ready for the eventual
They're ambitious.
transfer.
They're ambitious.
But
very ambitious of both musicals.
That handle was created for the ART one like almost a year ago. So
I know, they're at Gatsby B-Way. I think it's funny. It's funny, like when Moulin Rouge even did that. They had their out of town, and they're like Moulin Rouge Broadway, and we're like, oh, I wonder what their plans are. I wonder what they're doing next.
Although with this one, again, there's been no transfer date at all. No. There's been no transfer season attached to this at all. Based on some TikToks, it seems like the rumor is that this is actually going to go to the West End first before it goes to Broadway. That's the main rumor right now. And then who knows what will happen from there. But just based on this creative team alone, I think it's pretty safe to say that their eyes are on Broadway. Whether the cast is the cast by the time we get there, because who knows how long this could take, that's unknown.
That's the thing, because, people, there's lots of thoughts on when this is going to go. And based on what we saw, I think they like this cast. And the longer you wait, the less likely everyone is going to have availability to bring this to its next iteration. I
really honestly only think that there's one person here who has less availability than the others, because Isaac is a TV and film man versus the rest of this cast that has not really broken out into that space as much as he has. But
sure,
obviously contracts are contracts everywhere.
Other contracts, other shows, other opportunities come up. People need to work. People need to make money.
100%, but a lot of these people are like lesser known at this stage that I would think that they would drop things for a Broadway debut. Whereas
honestly, yeah, like
Isaac's had that moment, short-lived. Actually, he not short-lived because he did a full run of Once on This Island. So he's been there. He's been there.
Yeah, it's just I think a lot of the people I agree are like hot up and coming people. Like I think Soleil Pfeiffer could have other opportunities that take her if the timing doesn't work out. I think Ben Levi Ross, he just finished The Connector, which we'll talk about later, and he's in this now. Like I think he could have other theater opportunities coming towards him. It's interesting. The longer development process takes, the more likely you are to lose cast. So I wonder if they might push.
But also I think we've said this for like the previous Gatsby, but Gatsby, it's kind of like
it is prestigious. It is very prestigious.
Yeah.
To do, especially with this creative team involved, and like their track record.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with it next. Like when this episode's coming out, it's still running. in Cambridge.
This is released next week, so it's on till August 3rd, but I just looked, it's sold out. So they do seem to have tickets sometimes become available like the day before, but like they're very expensive tickets right now. There is a Today Takes lottery, but like I don't even know how many tickets are in that lottery. It's also pretty high. It's like $75 for those tickets. So it's kind of like you had to be there in that like elite club. It feels almost like elitist at this point, because also at the time of record, and I'm assuming at the time of episode release because it's next week, like not a lot of people are talking about this. So it's like very few of us. Well, no, that theater holds 500 plus people. So like people have seen it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of their audience base is made up of subscribers. And then the remaining tickets are bought by crazy people like us. Not crazy, but
it's actually,
people who...
I was going to say, New York is very close. So anyone that lives in New York could just hop on a train.
New York is close, but, you know, people who are chasing out of towns, let's say, is kind of the other half of the audience. So it's half subscribers and half people chasing out of towns and upcoming potential Broadway productions. I don't necessarily... I mean, I'm wondering how many audience members saw this being advertised on their subway and were like, oh, maybe I should check that out just randomly. You know, I think it's a very specific audience for something like this.
Although there is a billboard in the subway because we did see it. So
yes, we did.
Maybe they were.
But it's funny, it's sold out. For who? For who's this advertisement for?
But it was also one of those things, we've like played this ticket game a few times. This was not easy to get a ticket for. I was in a waiting room for like 3.5 hours for this show. The website crashed, if you remember. It was like very dramatic. And then we ended up getting them, I think it was the first day, but like much later in the day because nobody could get in. We bought front row tickets, which were $35 plus $8 service fee American, obviously. Which like I don't have to say that for anyone that is listening to us in the States because it's just money to you. But we bought them. It was a closed caption performance, which meant nothing for us specifically. There was a section of the theater that was dedicated to be able to view those closed captions. We saw the thing. I didn't see it like from the other side, but we saw it from the back.
It was behind us. So our seats were not closed captioned at all. Even when we bought them, I was worried. I was like, oh, should we not have bought these? But it's
not relaxed.
It was not relaxed. The production was exactly the same. It was just captioned, and it impacted our experience absolutely zero.
The other thing that it was audio described. I will say, just based on the website, it's irrelevant right now for recording, but the day that this episode is released, yesterday was the relaxed performance. So I'm kind of curious to know what that means for this show, because a lot of it's pretty dark in there. So to think that to have the lights, like the house lights maybe on, the audio like not as loud, like I'm just curious what that would be like for literally any performance. I'm curious what a relaxed performance is like. Yeah, and it's also great that they offer that stuff. But in terms of this episode, we are not going to do what we normally do, which is like talk about our relationship to The Great Gatsby, because if you're interested, you can listen to our other Gatsby episode where we did all of that. But we will kind of be doing, which is like, I don't know, sometimes it feels unfair because they are completely different productions, but there is absolutely no way to talk about this production without comparing it to the other production. So, yeah. I will also say that we did record some first initial thoughts as soon as we left the theater, so I will be inserting that here. It's Saturday, June 29th. It's almost 5:15 p.m. and we've just left the matinee performance of Gatsby, an American Myth.
We are free from our yonder pouches.
Also, we are inserting this into this episode, so sorry if it's windy. Oh, Soleil across the street.
Oh, Dad. Hey, girl.
Hey, girl. She got squeak green. She's liking our story right now as we speak. Okay, without like actually going into it, because I actually can't comprehend my thoughts right now.
To think about. I need to like read a lot. I need to think a lot. I need to ponder.
Oh my God, look at that dog.
Where?
Having a photo shoot. This is such a different interpretation from the previous Gatsby that we saw.
Yes.
I think it remains that Isaac's still our boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep. Yeah, like it's hard not to compare, but what I'll say is this one is much more impressionistic of Gatsby. You're still getting the same story beats, but even just the way it's visually conveyed, it feels so different. from costuming to movement to dance to the stage to the set. Everything is so, it's giving you an idea of things as opposed to showing you exactly what to think or exactly where we are.
We also were in the front row.
I know.
So that was an experience in itself. We were basically like in that show at some points. Some points I was really stressed. Oh, and Ben Levi Ross enjoying tacos at, maybe we won't say for public reasons. You know, you gotta love when a show is out of town in a small little community because you never know who you'll see. We're pretty sure that Isaac was getting Uber Eats ordered to the theater because he's the only one that didn't come out of the stage door.
He left when we were in the bathroom.
We're happy to see him walking off stage this time.
So different.
Any other like thoughts before we go back into this episode?
Everyone sounded so amazing. No one's ever sounded more amazing than everyone in this show.
We've said this previously that like Isaac, not always a forward performer, but tonight, voice forward.
In that Act 1 finale specifically, I don't know what it's called, right at the end of Act 1, he is kind of having a solo belting moment, and he sounds so
incredible.
Good in a way he's never sounded good before.
Larry Ward?
He sounds good all the time, but never that good.
Charlotte, who plays Daisy? Damn, girl.
Crazy.
So beautiful. And also the saddest thing about this as we're walking to the... Soleil Pfeiffer. As we're walking to the train is that we'll never hear these songs for so long. They just have to live in our memories, and even then, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
who knows what will make it to a final production and what we'll get a recording of, if ever.
All right, well, we're off to MJ the Musical tonight. Bye! Let's get into this show. So, I don't even know. What do you want to start with, like, the Yonder Pouch experience? Like, the walking experience?
Sure. I really tried to take video of our Yonder Pouch experience, but then I got very flustered with the phone. As did Tara. So all of the recording
I couldn't turn my phone off.
Being flustered, turning her phone off, and then I missed the actual insertion of the phone into the Yonder Pouch. Basically, yeah, this is the first time using a Yonder Pouch. I'd known of them previous being used at like concerts and comedy shows. I know like Freestyle of Supreme used it. I know Take Me Out used it. When we heard it was a show for Yonder Pouches, my first thought was, is there nudity in this show? The answer is no, spoiler alert. But that was my first thought because for Take Me Out, that's why they used it.
But I'm pretty sure the first time the Yonder Pouch was used was for like a Kanye concert. He was the one that was like, I want a phone-free experience. And in my opinion, this is all this show wanted was a phone-free experience.
I know, but before seeing it, I was like, I wonder why. Because on Broadway, the two shows mainly that I know used it were Freestyle of Supreme, I think because it was like different every night. And so it kind of enticed people to want to be recording because it was truly like only happening once. And the other show is Take Me Out because there's full frontal nudity and to protect the actors and protect, you know, the safe space that the theater is.
It didn't end up working because there's a full bootleg online of Take Me Out.
But you know, the effort was there to try and protect the actors in that way. So my thought was, are they using it for the same reason? And the answer was no. I really think it was to protect this out-of-town tryout process, this almost like extended preview process of development and being like, we don't want people to see it or hear this before it's ready. And that's why we really don't want the recording, even the chance of recording. So we went through, it's a little gray pouch. They said extra large on the side, but it was pretty hard to like my phone fit in, and my phone is not like a huge phone.
I had a phone and a watch in there, so it fit.
It fit, but I was like, yeah, I wonder if someone has like, what do you do if someone has an iPad? Like, that's my question.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm not suggesting anybody does this, but like they didn't check our bag. So I easily could have had a second phone or a recording device in my bag. You had your like film camera with you. Nobody said
Imagine
anything.
I just like took it out and like
from
the front row, just like flash. And I also find it kind of interesting. Again, this is a separate scenario because it is an out of town, but a lot of shows now are like film the bows.
Well,
you can film the bows. I'm just like,
I was
okay.
about to ask you, like, from what we've seen with, I guess it's really been like the last like few years since the pandemic, the like rise of theater TikTok and the amount that like people are doing like day in the lives on their way to the theater. Like, do you think that this is the right approach for this kind of a show, or should they be letting people in on some of it so that they can have people like us, like, post about it to get more, like, word of mouth? Like, I don't really know that this is the right move as a whole. I'm not saying, like, specifically for this production, but just, like, in the world that we're in right now, any video, any marketing, press is press, whether good or bad. And I feel like it's always a good idea to have people be able to record some aspect as free promotion for your show.
I do think, I mean, speaking specifically of this show, and again, not to compare it to the other Gatsby, this show has literally zero social media presence. They have released 4 production stills. Their Instagram has 1 post, and
It's
that's it.
like-
it's the logo.
It's the logo moving with the breath in the background.
They have literally nothing. Whereas the Paper Mill Gatsby, when it was in its out of town, they had, you know, social media. They were backstage. They were doing
Which,
promo
like,
clips.
shout out to Catherine Quinn, because she is doing all of this.
She was doing that, and it got people excited or enticed or interested in the show. And right now, this show is doing absolutely none of that. And I think we can say, you know, it is, again, you know, this show is still in development. Like, they're making that very clear. It's still in development. This is a developmental phase for this show. So we don't want to be putting so much out there that doesn't end up translating to the final show, or... But I do think, like, the amount of the mystery of this show right now, the amount of mystery that they're leaving with it is really interesting.
They've released 4 photos. You see what the stage looks like. So, like, that's out there for the public. So what's the harm in having people take a photo of the stage? You know what I mean? Like, it's special, but it's not that special.
I really think they're just, I think and we'll see what they do in like another production of this, but I really think in this case they're really trying to, like, protect the process very much and not letting so much be out there for judgment without seeing the production while it's still kind of in this developmental phase. I think that's the idea behind the Underpunches this time. Which
is so crazy, because they were like, please film our entire developmental process in Paper Mill. Like, everybody have your phones out. Please film literally everything.
The philosophy is really, really so different. And I'm curious, like, obviously, if you've heard our thoughts on the previous Gatsby, and I think we'll get into those, like, a little bit later, because I don't want the whole episode to be overshadowed by, like, and this is what they did, and then this is exactly what they did. But I think the core of it is that the source material is the same, and the approach in not just adaptation, but in every way possible has been so different. And I think that's super, super interesting.
I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've seen something other than, like, a Shakespeare that is based on the same well, definitely not in the same year. I've never seen something in the same year that's based on the same subject material and has 2 completely different productions. Also, just as a reminder to reiterate, Gatsby was released in the public domain in 2021, which is why we believe this is all happening so fast.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this production. Is it best to start with the creative team? Is it best to start with, like, the show itself? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think let's talk about the creative team, because I think that does set the tone. The way that this has been described kind of has been the Florence Gatsby, the Florence and the Machine, the Florence Welch Gatsby. And that's kind of how, before this even started, it has been differentiated. But when the Paper Mill Gatsby was announced, and then we looked at it, we're like, oh, this isn't the Florence Gatsby. Like,
also, sorry, not to interrupt you, but, like, I don't think we even said, this was at ART in Cambridge.
Yeah, we
said it was in Cambridge, but I don't think we said it's at ART. It's the American
We had to take a trip. We had to travel.
Yeah. It's in the, what's it called? The Loeb. I think there's only one theater in there, but the Loeb
I think there's
theater,
a second one, but the Loeb, does it even say on
stage
here?
Something? ART, which, if you've heard us speak, or if you've listened to previous episodes, we've talked about ART quite a bit. This is a pretty traditional out-of-town theater. Waitress started here. Did Waitress? Yeah, Waitress started
Pippin?
here. Jagged started here.
Diane Paulus is the creative director, I think, and so she directed
Comet.
Waitress. She directed Pippin. She directed.
Was it Waitress? There was a sign. There was a flag for Waitress.
No, it was
so I'm
Waitress.
just saying it was
Waitress was there, and which was directed by Dan Paulus. She directed Jagged. Like, this is classic. Great Comet had Out of Town here, directed by Rachel Chavkin, which this is also directed by. So it's, and I also think a lot of, like, you're pretty close to home if you're based in New York City and you're working on shows here. So it's a good spot.
Last time we were in Boston was for the Moulin Rouge Out of Town, which was at the Emerson Colonial, obviously a much, much bigger space. But while we were there, I'm pretty sure Jagged was either just starting or almost ending at ART.
It was like almost ending.
And then they basically both ran on Broadway at the same time. So that was a pretty like quick like transfer for both of those shows. But yeah, sorry, back to that. So the Florence Gatsby, go ahead.
So yeah, we've kind of been speaking of it as the Florence and the Machine Gatsby, which had many thoughts in my mind for what are the vibes of this show going to be as like a fan of Florence, as a, you know, seeing her performance style, this kind of like witchy, I don't know, like she kind of, her music is kind of like ethereal. And it really,
She's
really
probably got one of the best voices like in the music industry.
Amazing. Florida.
We've not got, that one.
So not that. She sounds great. Someone's like,
she does, but like when someone says Florence and the Machine, you're not like Florida,
no.
Taylor Swift.
No. Well, it's new. And even on the way home from our road trip, we were listening to Florence and the Machine albums, trying to like place the songs and find inspiration and find through lines. So the creative team, Florence Welch did lyrics, and also music by Florence Welch and Thomas Bartlett, who we discovered is like a collaborator of Florence and the Machine, has like worked on our albums previously, like in production and stuff. Book by Martina Mayock, I think her name is pronounced, Pulitzer Prize winning for Cost of Living. Is that right?
I don't know.
There's no bios in this pamphlet, so it's really killing me.
I think you're right, though. I think you're right.
And directed by Rachel Chavkin, choreography by Sonia Taye. So Sonia Taye, the last time we were in Boston, she also did Moulin Rouge, and that was her like Broadway debut, Moulin Rouge, and now she's kind of been like dipping her toes into musicals more and more. And I was really excited, especially with the combination of like Florence music and Sonia Taye choreography, Rachel Chavkin direction. I was like, okay, this is exciting me. This combination of creatives is making me really interested in to see what they can do with this material.
Also, we've mentioned this previously, but we didn't mention here. The other thing that we know about Florence and Gatsby is that she had a song for the Great Gatsby movie, which I can't remember what it's called right now. It's not called Green Light, but she says something about a green light.
Yeah, she sings Green Light.
If you listen to that song, which is an amazing song, you're like, oh, I see what you were trying to do here with this musical. Which is why we said kind of at the beginning of this episode that like whatever happens here between now and the time that it could potentially be on Broadway, like if any of us think that Florence doesn't want to have a Broadway debut, like why are you doing a musical then? You know what I mean? So this is not just to be seen in Cambridge and never again, as far as I'm concerned.
No, this absolutely is Broadway aimed, and it's aimed at more at a larger production and a bigger production. Every decision that they've made has been for that, like including, I think, like, you know, getting a name like Florence, enticing her to write a musical. Like, I'd be curious to hear from her. It's funny because like we haven't heard from anyone on this. We haven't heard from a single person. I would be curious to hear from her, like, how did she get involved with this? Did
like
someone
a year ago, but like
a long
very,
time ago?
very briefly. Yeah.
How did she get involved? Did they approach her? Did she approach someone? Had she told someone, you know, I kind of want to write a musical? And they were like, oh, let me matchmake you with this person. Or were they developing this and they approached Florence? Were like, how did this team come together? I'd be so interested to hear, especially particularly how she got involved, because as far as we know, she hasn't written a musical before. And this is like not her path previously. So yeah, I'm so curious. And that's kind of, again, part of the out of town trial process is like, you have such limited information to work with to talk about the show.
Well, not always, though, because, again, the other Gatsby gave us a plethora of information. Like, I knew every person that was in that cast. I knew everything that they were thinking at all times. I had listened to a 40-minute conversation from that creative team. So, like, I don't agree that the out of town... I think just this specific one is very tight-lipped.
Yes, I think a lot of out of towns maybe have, like, somewhere in the middle.
Even like Anne Juliet being in Toronto, we had a lot of information here. They did multiple interviews with Mervish.
We did have a lot more information here, but that was also like was already on the West End. Like it wasn't a brand new production. Like this is world premiere production here. Whereas Anne Juliet, we were just kind of moving some lines around to make it work for a North American audience.
My direct comparison is to the other Gatsby, which was so much overexposure. So like, and that was a world premiere out of town. So same, but so different.
Even like, let's say like Moulin Rouge, a world premiere out of town. I'm trying to think what else has been a world premiere out of town.
We had a lot of information for that too. There was a behind the scenes
we definitely had more information. We definitely had more information. It's really interesting how little information they've given us for this one.
And I do think that that's like part of like the mystery with this production, because this production is like very ominous, very like dark. I don't know. It's very interesting. I feel like now's the time to like get into the like theme choices. So I'm assuming if you're listening to this episode, you know the premise of The Great Gatsby. If you don't, Google a synopsis, because like, again, we've talked about this previously, and also like it's 100-year-old story at this point. So just to say for the other Gatsby, which again, we talked about, that one really focuses on like the romantic love story between Daisy and Gatsby, which I don't know necessarily 100% exists within the text on the pages. I think it was more romanticized than it actually reads, but that's my thoughts on that. Whereas this one, I think we've both agreed that it's more of a look at the class structure in society. Right?
I think when you start even by looking at the title, they're like Gatsby, an American myth. Their goals, I think, here are to explore, you know, the American dream, you know, core things about America. We like things that are talked about that kind of like, again, class structure, like wealth disparity, you know, healthcare, guns, Indigenous people, like all of these things are touched upon in this adaptation of Great Gatsby. It comes back to really like, it's so interesting how two people can read the exact same book and come out with wildly different things. You know, I don't doubt that there are people who have read The Great Gatsby.
I actually don't think that the other people read The Great Gatsby.
Well, I don't doubt that there are people who have read The Great Gatsby and were like, what a beautiful love story. Like, I don't doubt that there are people who feel that way. Like there must be.
It's interesting though, because literally like on the way home, like you were reading more about like the characters of Daisy and Gatsby, like book wise, not like based on these two shows.
And they absolutely changed certain things for this production from the book
100%.
to kind of drive home the points they're trying to make.
Just based on like age, like I find it a little hard to believe that people would be like, oh my God, this beautiful love story, when this man is like so much older.
Well,
than this woman. And also they've met like 3 times.
As we know, people love to see what they love to see. And not to say that like how I read it is the only correct way to read it, and how this production reads it is the only correct way to see it, because, you know, there are many, you know, you can take a million different things from the exact same piece of text, and that is for you to take and understand it. But one of the things that I was, I think, most impressed by in this production was the theming, like taking the themes that are there in the book and expanding and kind of like driving point those homes, even if at times I was like, this is maybe a little bit heavy-handed, or maybe like a little bit like we're going a little too, not too far, but we're kind of hammering the point home, where I want it to be like a bit more of like a delicate representation. That was, I think, when they read this, they're like, I want to adapt this. They wanted to adapt it for those themes of class, of, you know, what makes America a country. And whereas the other adaptation, which I don't want to like keep comparing, I think they read this book and were like, we love big parties, we love this love story. And I think it's, you know, it's funny, you can have a bucket of like 100 things in front of you, and some people will take out some things, some people will take out the other things, and you end up with 2 completely different things, even though what they started with was the exact same. I find it so interesting that we really just, like, we ended up here.
Again, I mean, we keep saying not to keep comparing, but it's going to keep happening the entire episode because it like literally just has to. But both of these shows actually have the exact same act break, which is kind of interesting when you look at the rest of the show and how much everything is like completely different, that still remained the exact same. So that's kind of interesting too, of like both creative teams were like, this feels like the moment to end it. I don't remember how long the other one was, but this one is 2 hours and 40 minutes.
I think it was about the same.
Flew by.
No,
this is
really
really well paced. I think that's probably obviously credit to like Martina and the book here. The book is really well paced. The timing is really well done.
The book is very good.
And it's been a long time that I've said like a 2 hour and 40 minute musical has flown by. So it didn't feel too long to me at all. I'm sure, I don't know if everyone feels the same way, but to me it was like a really well structured, paced musical.
You know, I was delving on Reddit and someone said they left it intermission. So, you know,
which is actually wild.
There's different things for every single person. And I think that's why it's so hard, because it's like, maybe for some people, the other Gatsby is the perfect Gatsby, you know?
Well, this is
not
the thing,
for me,
like,
but
I was talking to Shara about this like literally the other day, and she said that like one of her coworkers was going to see The Great Gatsby on Broadway, and she was like, why? And I was like, why would you deter them? I absolutely would recommend that show if you're looking for a big party, beautifully staged, Tony Award winning costume musical. Like, I would not deter. We've said this before. Just because we didn't like it doesn't mean that I don't recommend it. I absolutely recommend it. It's for a specific like amount. If it's someone that doesn't see a lot of Broadway, they're looking for a big Broadway show, go see The Great Gatsby. Like, why would you not?
It really depends what you're looking for, what your audience is. My dislike of the musical Back to the Future is well documented on this podcast, and yet I would recommend that musical to certain people to see on Broadway, because I think it ticks boxes of what a lot of people are looking for on Broadway. It's not what I'm looking for, but when you're recommending something to someone, it can't just be like, well, I loved this. It's like, what?
Right, exactly.
When you're giving a gift, it has to be like, well, what would you like? You know,
and also,
it's not about what you like.
Like, forget the subject matter. If you are a fan of Jeremy Jordan and Ivo Noblezada,
sure,
go to that show.
They're singing.
You will never see them sing.
Notes.
Like, they sound amazing on that show.
They are.
So, like,
they're hitting notes in that show.
And they've just extended themselves until February. So, like, people are
there's
going
song tickets
to see this musical. It's
okay,
it's a big show.
Let's put a moratorium on talking about that Gatsby for like 10 minutes. I really like talking about this one. Okay, let's talk about the set. Let's start with the set, like what we got in there. The set is made up, it's all silver. I believe even the tinsel coming down was silver, and just the lighting.
Which I actually hated the tinsel.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it. So the set is made up of car parts, like aluminum, chrome car parts. It's like kind of like, and makes this giant staircase that will end up coming.
Sculpture.
Yeah, it is very sculptural. That's a really good way to describe it. And you've got like kind of like, I don't know, a tire. Is there a tire? No, but it's all just like really high, everything. And there's like staircases and just entrances and exits made of giant silver car parts. The back is lights. It has like little spotlights, or not spotlights, but kind of circular lights.
Like
and then
tube
there's
lights.
also like, yeah. And then there's also like longer lights. This is really like accurate description here. There's
No, they're like long tubes. Everything is tubed.
No, some are circles.
I don't know that they were. I think the way that it was done was...
No, because remember when they do the eyes.
I know, circles. But I think... Oh, I thought that was like portions of light to create the circle. I didn't think it was a circle light. But I could be wrong.
All circles and then like tubes also. But like, what do I know? We saw it one time. We couldn't even take a pic. It's all just up here. It's all in my mind.
Yeah. Also, I will say that like... sight lines is probably irrelevant, because again, like, if you're seeing this production, you probably already have tickets. If you don't have tickets, I don't know that you're seeing this production, but you're not obstructed if you're in the front row, but you are you don't get to see the full stage picture if you're in the front row.
We were a bit too close, I would say. Not complaining for the price, but 5 or 6 rows back would have been really great. The green light was like kind of behind us because it's off the stage. So
I knew it was there, so I was looking for it, but yes.
I didn't realize until they turned it on, and I had to fully turn my body to see the green light. It was a little bit like directly to the side, like slightly behind us. And
I also think,
we'll
though,
talk about
as a set choice, they could have moved that back, because nothing happened over there. They didn't even walk over there.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to have something to reach for, so they kind of put it a little further out. So it was like it wasn't on stage; it was something to reach for. And what I also will say is, when we get into costumes, the the bottom of people's pants and shoes comes really into it. And being in the first row, the stage kind of obstructed. So I was kind of like, what are their shoes looking like? Like,
yes,
so
but
it's
also,
hard to see sometimes.
That also depends on height. So if you're like a
no,
6
absolutely.
foot person, you'll be able to see everything.
You'll be fine. But if you're a 6 foot person, like, don't sit in the front row. Like, I'm sorry, don't sit in the front row.
But what if I was 6 feet and wanted the cheap tickets? Like, I can't be sent to the back because I'm tall.
Everyone hates you if you do that.
I can't help my height.
But, you know, so yes, as a short person, what I would say is the stage was like a little bit high, and like people's feet, there's a little bit of tap number that was like a little bit obstructed for information. But again, who knows what the next stage will look like, and what the house will be.
Also, the band is on
silver
stage.
car parts. Yes, like kind of on top of the silver car parts, right at the back. Even like the piano player, who's the conductor, is a little bit in the show. Beautiful grand piano, and it's on kind of this balcony that the cast, like, that's kind of what I think of as like Gatsby's Manor, that platform up there, and he hangs out a lot up there.
There's 2 other like main sets. There's Myrtle and Wilson's house that is like a roll on. Honestly, think of like 4 pieces of drywall like stuck together to create like a room of a house, but it's on like a platform, and it rolls on and off, which I believe in the videos that people have put out from like dress rehearsal, speaking of it, that was one of the things that also didn't work, or a crew member had to push it on because the like track wasn't working, type thing. Also, if you remember, they they couldn't start on time because there was no air conditioning. Do you remember that?
Right. I did when I was like re-researching,
which I was like, it was well air conditioned when we were in there.
It was crisp in there. It was crisp.
And then the other set piece that was the one that like absolutely did not work in the dress rehearsal is the like hotel / like underground apartment scene. There's like this, I don't even know how to properly describe it without giving the worst description of all time, which if anyone has seen the videos of Justin Timberlake's concert when he sings Mirrors, there's this like big, what even is it? It's like a big like rectangular box that like comes out that he's on.
For Justin Timberlake?
Yeah.
It's a mirror.
This is like a big square that almost is a little like mirrored and textured that goes up to create like roof.
It has like a tin ceiling on it, which is like very era appropriate. And so
crew members have to strap it in.
Yes, to get and it's come on by wires. And then like a platform comes up with a set that at one point is Myrtle's apartment that Tom has for her. And at another point, the hotel room that kind of the whole cast goes to in Act 2. And then so also to represent...
Yeah, go ahead.
To represent like Tom and Daisy's house, like a giant dining room table will be wheeled on in and out.
But I had heard that the platforms didn't work for the dress rehearsal, like the lifts for that. So like they would just roll on a couch and then roll off a couch.
And that's a part of the preview.
Well, this is the thing too. Not even preview because that wasn't even a preview. Yeah. That was a dress rehearsal. So like if you're going to a dress rehearsal, you have to know that there's definitely going to be like technical difficulties because it's the first time they're putting it on.
That was the dress rehearsal had originally been a sold performance that they kind of 100%.
Like, but you could have got your money back.
You could have got a refund. You could have got a refund and still seen it. So like, you know,
exactly.
Not bad.
So you know what you're signing up for. But yeah, that's basically like the gist of the like set. Everything is very dark, including the lighting.
Everything is monochromatic except for very, very few things.
Yes. Costumes. Did we talk about? I know you said the dirt on.
We haven't really talked about
the actual costumes. So the ensemble members are. I want to say that the ensemble is basically like gender fluid in this production. Like men are wearing dresses, women are wearing pants, which obviously in that time period would like, it wouldn't happen when you're like in the face of society, but I think it would happen in like Prohibition era, like bootlegs, all that stuff. Like if you're in a club scene, like everybody's kind of with everybody. So I do think that makes sense for this time period that they're going with.
My read on it was absolutely like the ideas that we have of what was occurring during the 1920s is from history books and from stories told, which were kind of like the very upfront things. We actually don't know, you know, what was happening in, let's say, like the more seedy underbelly of these like Prohibition era big parties or speakeasies and how people were dressing, how people were behaving. But my read on it was, you know, those things that might have been scandalous at the time are not necessarily scandalous to us now. So they have, you know, men in dresses, women in pants, kind of and wearing makeup and dressed more androgynously and more avant-garde to even represent to the audience, this is on the outskirts of society, or these people are behaving more bohemian than what we would expect.
I actually disagree that it's not scandalous now. I don't think it's scandalous to us specifically, but it definitely is still something to a large majority of the population.
No. What I'm saying is what a woman wearing. I think we're saying the same thing. Like, how we expect them to be dressed might have been scandalous then, but it wouldn't be scandalous to us now to see, you know, a woman in a flapper dress showing a thigh. So they had to go even more extreme, let's say extreme, by flipping the gender and being more androgynous and being more unexpected and more sexual to represent, you know, the level of scandal at the time. Like they brought this level of scandal up so that we as an audience would understand how scandalous it was then at the time.
Right. I meant more of the sense of, like, I've read comments about them, people saying, will not name names, but like, why is this man wearing a dress? And I'm like, oh, we're still talking about this. So that's
so interesting.
like
so interesting to go see a musical and be like, why is a man wearing a dress? Like, such an interesting concept.
But I think that like having a comment like that shows you that the story is still relevant today.
No, absolutely.
When we get like all the way through, you know what I mean?
And having, you know, the men wearing these like 1920s flapper dresses is communicating effectively to those audience members as well, being like, this is a scandalous party. You are scandalized because this is a scandalous party. You know what I mean? Like, so it's doing its job by having, you know, when all the staff comes out and they're all wearing the same, like, kind of like maid outfits with the apron, like men and women alike, like, you know, that they're communicating effectively what they want to be communicating, that this is not, I don't know, just like a chill event. This is a wild and scandalous party.
But then the ensemble also has these like worker costumes, which if anyone has seen Hadestown, it's very reminiscent of the leather overalls that are in like the underground. It's basically the same thing. I don't love the beanies that they're wearing. It kind of like takes you out of time period, which is like a little strange. But then the main thing is that all of the ensemble members are in black. Nick is in black and white. Jordan
He's got like a gray striped blazer, if you will.
So we play with black, white, gray for most people. I would say the rich wear white. So Daisy and Tom are wearing white.
Yes.
Meyer Wilshire is, well, he's in just like a fancy
he's in like
suit.
A gray,
so I don't like,
I think he's like a gray pinstripe suit.
Nick wears both. Jordan also kind of wears both. Now I'm curious.
When Jordan is with Tom and Daisy, she's in white and kind of matches them. But when then Nick sees her at the party, she's in like her gray and black outfit. So she kind of, you know, flips in and out of both.
Yeah. But I'm curious on this one. So if anyone's listening that was at that like dress rehearsal first preview performance, everyone had said that everybody was in black and white except for Gatsby, who's in a pink suit. But when we saw it, Myrtle and Wilson are in red. So I'm kind of curious to know if that was...
Is that a change?
Was that a change? They're still wearing kind of more like... And by red, I mean like a deep burgundy. It's not like a bright red. Yeah. It's very like dark.
And then to convey, like, Myrtle will take off her red and just be in black when she's like with Tom, or to kind of like blend in to the partygoers or whatever. Whereas George or Wilson, he always has that red shirt on. But yeah, Myrtle has like, she kind of shapeshifts a little bit. With that red.
And then, as you said, like, they're dirty. I just listened to Dylan, like Theme Park Entertainment's like 25-minute comparison video on the two Gatsbys, and he said that the only person that wasn't dirty is Gatsby, but I swear Isaac was dirty.
He was dirty the night we saw it, and I wonder if they're kind of playing around with that. For me, everyone was dirty, and I even heard at one point that like maybe Myrtle and Wilson weren't dirty, like their red wasn't dirty, but theirs was definitely dirty when we saw it. The only person who wasn't dirty, I believe, who didn't have that like rust dirt on their bottom of their pants, on their shoes, was kind of a character that comes in right at the end, the day we saw it.
That. Yeah.
We'll get there. But everyone else had that rust, that dirt on the bottom of their pants, on their shoes, the bottom of their dresses. Like, no one is exempt from that in the day we saw it. And yeah,
it's not like we do not speak of this.
It's up to our interpretation.
So I think it's it's also something that a lot of people don't seem to be talking about as much online, whereas like to us it was one of the first things that stood out of like, oh, like even the shoes are dirty, like why are they dirty? And again, I agree, it's like up to your interpretation, like what you think. I was surprised that Tom and Daisy were dirty, but then when I thought more about it,
they're
like,
the most dirty.
They're
the most.
But when I was like, oh, is this like a rich or poor situation? But then when Tom, Daisy, and Gatsby are all also covered in dirt, I'm like, no, this is not a rich or poor situation, because everybody is doing
And again,
this.
I'm wondering in a future production when there's more media, more interviews about this, if they'll kind of talk explicitly about the thought process of, you know, why we chose to do that, why we chose to represent this in this way, and what exactly it is supposed to represent, why we chose this color. Like, I'm hoping eventually they'll get into that, or maybe it'll be cut for the next production. Who knows? But but I'm hoping we'll get kind of more insight into their thought process and the reasoning. But for now, it's really just up to you as an audience's interpretation. Like, my interpretation, I guess, is like no one is exempt from the dirt of like America and capitalism, and I don't even know, like everyone is, like, you cannot escape it, and everyone is implicated in America. But
Whereas,
does that even make sense?
Well, yes, but like mine is kind of like based on the ending of this show that like this land is not your land, so if you're stepping on it, you are a part of the problem as well, without like acknowledgement, which is kind of like the same vein, but like slightly different. Sandy Powell did the
everyone's gonna
costumes.
come with something. Everyone's gonna come with something different, which I think makes it good, makes it interesting.
So Sandy Powell did the costumes for this. I'm just on her Wikipedia page. She has done a lot of movies. So kind of, I'm like, did she even do any theater here? Like, most of her stuff is for like Academy Awards and the BAFTAs. So
she does like period
sure.
costumes a lot, I think.
Yeah, like
period
most
movies.
Recently, she's done like The Favorite, Mary Poppins Returns, The Irishman, like the 20.
Did
she did the 2025 Snow White. So,
did she do Atonement? Did I make that up?
What year?
2007? Or was that somebody else?
No, she didn't do Atonement, but she did The Departed, The Other Boleyn Girl, Shutter Island. Did she do Great Gatsby?
Sure.
She did The Wolf of Wall Street. So she's done a lot of Leo stuff.
So she's done like Leo,
Shakespeare
Scorsese
in Shakespeare in Love, a lot of British. She's British, so I actually think this might be her first theater thing.
So
what it
interesting.
looks like. So very interesting to get
then.
someone. It's the creative team seems to be handpicked from like different like walks of life here, so it's pretty interesting. Okay, so without getting into like the story, because as I said, we all kind of know the story of The Great Gatsby. What worked for you in this production?
The first thing that really, really worked for me in this production was kind of the perspective that we walked in from. The book is narrated by Nick Carraway, and I tried to reread the book this week. I got like 2 chapters in. Okay, it takes time. And the book is very clearly from Nick Carraway's POV. And the musical is also very committed to kind of having him be this like voyeur throughout the entire show, and having him be present, having most things be through his eyes. And even when you're learning people's backstory, you're learning it because Nick is being told it by someone else, whether that's like Myra Wolfsheim by Jordan, or I don't know, when he learns about like Myrtle's Myrtle, and even by Gatsby, like everything you're learning is through Nick, and what he is learning from other people. And I think they like were very strong in keeping that perspective, because Nick is kind of this everyman, and you as the audience are this everyman, and so you're walking through his shoes and seeing it the way he sees it, as this new person entering this world.
What's the connection again? He's Daisy's cousin, right?
He's Daisy's cousin. Yeah. And like they're not close, but he moved to New York. They live in New York. They invited him over for dinner, and then he kind of gets caught up in this thing world. And he coincidentally lives next to Gatsby.
Me at the end of the show asking you, what's the timeline of this? And like, unknown.
You don't know. You really don't know. It's, the act.
Is it a week?
Kind of
is it a month? Is it a day?
Act 2 ends up taking place over like a very short amount of time. But Act 1 maybe I think is a bit more extended. I actually funnily think when I was reading it, they're like, it's a few days before the 4th of July. And I was like, oh my God, that's when we saw it. So it's summer. It's the heat. It's summer.
That makes sense. Not to bring in the other Gatsby, that makes sense because there's a 4th of July number in that show.
Yeah. So that
makes
summertime.
sense.
It's
the
summertime.
Time period makes sense. Yeah. Well, we know it's summertime because it's so hot outside.
It's hot. It's really hot. It's really hot. So I really liked that perspective. I also really loved the use of the ensemble in this production. I really liked the kind of perspective that they're giving you. There are, like, from the book, the adaptation, from the book, one of the main kind of metaphors is this billboard of these eyes, and the eyes are addressed briefly in this production, but not a lot, and I almost think they could cut that reference for me. But what I think they replace the reference of these, like, watching eyes over top, kind of observing everything and being, like, judgmental of everything, is it's replaced for me in this production with the eyes of the ensemble, whether they're, you know, the working class or the party goers at Gatsby's. Like, people are rarely alone on stage having a scene. There's always ensemble members observing, watching, whether they're part of the action or not. And I think that works to give that metaphor. I really like the use of the ensemble and, like, the way that they're choreographed.
Didn't you read a review that was like, I don't like that the ensemble is just
yeah, like, I did. You know, we were scouring Reddit. I don't even have people to give credit to these thoughts to, but they're like, what were they doing? They were just standing there on the side, and I was like, oh, I
think you've missed the
point. Well, I don't know. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. We don't know. My interpretation of them was they are watching, they are judging. You know, you cannot escape the watchful eyes of, in the book, like Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. And in this case, you know, of society, of the world, of everyone around you. You cannot escape that judgment. And so that's what they represented to me, and that's what I took from them. And using them to create set sometimes, as opposed to having physical set, using them to create atmosphere versus something physical worked really well for me. But not for everyone.
Yeah. The other thing in terms of story, we've really built out Myrtle here, especially in Act 1, which is not in the book.
No,
there are obviously, like, Myrtle is a character in the book, but she's not as built out as she is in this production. The other two main things here, in this version, Nick and Jordan are gay, which I believe there are pieces in the text that, like, insinuate that this is the way that it was meant to be done on stage as well, but it is explicit in this musical that these characters are queer.
Absolutely is explicit that Nick is. I think Jordan's maybe more of, like, a suggestion up to your interpretation.
Well, I always thought, which is such a, like, stereotype, but they're like, she's a golfer, so, like, you would think that that's a more masculine, like, career.
Right.
So, like,
and she's
that's
described,
why
she's, like, tall, and, like, the way she stands,
she wears
even.
pants.
But, you know, exactly. Like, but that's why people talk about things being, like, queer coded and, like, maybe not explicit. Like, that character is potentially, like, queer coded. And even in this production, like, it's not explicit in the way that you see, you know, Nick kissing a man, being with men in the show. Like, for Jordan, it's kind of, like, left up to you. The biggest suggestion is when Daisy suggests matchmaking them, they're both like, oh, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Both, absolutely not. And then it's never addressed again between them. You know, they, like, hang out and spend time together. But, yeah, it is very interesting that, like, you know, what different people take from the exact same text. And reading it, you know, there is a scene where, you know, Nick is, you know, next to a bed with a guy who's in his boxer shorts. Like, those are things that, you know, when I read it in grade 10 in a Catholic high school, was not, like, emphasized and looked upon or, like, highlighted in any way. But reading it now, you're like, okay, you know, maybe there's, like, hints of things and little different things that the author has left for you. And then some people adapting something will take that and make it bigger, and some people will squash it down. And I think it's interesting.
The other thing, too, is that there seems to be a little bit more of, like, war play in this, like Gatsby's war storyline and, like, how he becomes who he becomes. And then, obviously, the biggest change is at the end, which we'll save that till the end. But I want to talk about the casting here. I am going to bring up the other Gatsby here because I do think it's important, because everyone's question is, why isn't Evil Noblezada in this version of Gatsby?
Or do we think she's upset she's not in this version of Gatsby?
Well, I think she's upset, but there's obviously, like, knowing what we know, she was not even a contender by the way that they've cast this. But it's a Rachel Chafkin directed project, which obviously she's done Hadestown, and in my opinion, her voice suits a Florence score. But that's just my opinion. So the other Gatsby is kind of the colorblind cast. So there are no, like, races, which is kind of crazy when you think about what we're talking about in this production, especially with class structure, that they completely just ignored that.
And racism is directly discussed in the book, like,
right,
you know, the scene of that first dinner party where Tom is kind of saying, you know, these things about, you know, Italians, and then Daisy's like, don't get him started on Indians, you know, talking about like Native American people, you know, that's pretty direct from that scene in the book. Like, it did not come out of nowhere. Like, those themes are not from nowhere. And so, sorry, continue what you were saying, but
I was just gonna say, like, so to colorblind cast, in my opinion, which I've also read many people's Reddit's opinion, it's like the Disney version of The Great Gatsby on Broadway, which is, they've made that choice, they've chosen to take those themes out of it, which is on them. Whereas this version is completely color conscious casting. So Daisy and Tom are white because they're rich, and white people are the rich people.
And so is Nick, and so is Jordan. Like,
yes, exactly. The, like, rich climb, basically. Gatsby is, well, Isaac Powell. But we haven't even placed names to people here, but we'll do that in a second. But Gatsby is half black, and what we learned, half Native American. And
but I also think the important thing about him is that he also, like, is white passing. Can pass for, you know, we know about him that, you know, based on like Isaac Powell's social media, his father is black, his mother was white. We also learned he has Native American ancestry.
His father is black and indigenous.
And indigenous. But I think but one of the key parts about him, about his Gatsby and himself playing Gatsby, is that he can pass for white. Like, it is a bit more ambiguous, his racial makeup, and I think that's what allows a lot of the story to take place.
I mean, this is an entire side conversation, but I actually think most of Isaac's roles are kind of based on that.
I think
we talked about the, like, Brendan Victor Dixon of it all during Once on This Island.
Yes, I mean, in Once on This Island, really, that is key, that he is from his character, Daniel, is from the side of the island where people from France, you know, married and had children with people from the island, and created this kind of class of people that were considered, you know, better than the natives to the island, which is from where Timoon is from. And yeah, we were talking about, you know, Brenda Victor Dixon seeing the show and kind of being upset, you know, this girl throwing her life away for this white boy, and people having to be like, he's actually biracial, which is, you know, kind of the point of the show. Yeah. In that, you know, if the Beauxhommes, if Daniel were to go to Paris, were to go to France, he would be looked down upon in the way that they look down upon the natives to the island there. I don't know. Yeah, but it is interesting that multiple times this has come up in his career. I think West Side Story the least, but even still, you know, it's something somewhat addressed.
And then Myrtle is played by Soleil Pfeiffer, who I'm on her Wikipedia now. I didn't know that she was born in Zimbabwe.
So interesting.
Amazing. So she's a Zimbabwe-born American actress. I'm trying to find... Her mother is black and was adopted and raised in Boston, while her father is white. So she's also mixed race. And then
she also played, like, Evita. She played Evita, which we've seen. So
Wilson is Matthew Amira, who I don't know his heritage, but he's not white. Like, so it just seems that the three characters here, which, spoiler, are also the three characters that die in this musical, are the ones that are not white. Whereas the difference is, like, the ensemble is full of all races.
Yeah,
it's just those, like, core characters. So for anybody that's asking why Eva is not in this version, Daisy is a white woman in this show, and by all of the text about racism, it would make no sense for Eva to be in this production.
As Daisy. I think she could do Myrtle.
She could do Myrtle, but Soleil is really great in this.
Soleil is fantastic. Soleil is a scene stealer,
and also
show, but
she's doing fine. She's a leading woman on Broadway right now. Like, she's good.
She's doing good. She's feeling good. Yeah. Because I did like her Daisy in the other production. Like, I thought I liked her portrayal of Daisy, but I do think, you know, we're doing something, in my opinion, like, very rich with the text and with the casting of the show in the ART version, that I like a lot, and I think is really working. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Let's talk about performances here, which I think will lead into music, but specifically to talk about these actors. Last time we saw Isaac Powell, he dislocated his knee on stage in front of us in West Side Story.
Oh my God.
I think it was a knee. Yeah, I got it.
It was definitely his knee, but I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly what happened, but it definitely was his knee.
It was his knee because he had to have surgery. And to see him on stage again, we were very nervous because obviously it was a matinee performance and he had been out of a previous matinee only once. It's like it's unknown.
Have the understudies even rehearsed when you're in this early of a
his understudy hadn't rehearsed, which at that point, which understandable because I think the show opened and then like 2 days later is when he went on type thing.
When you're this early, like in a production process overall, like not even just after previews, but this is the first time the show is, as we talked about, potentially still changing, and they're changing it on Isaac and not on the understudy or on it's a standby. He has a standby in the show.
Standby.
Which
he has an understudy also. He has both.
Yes. If you have a standby, you also have understudies who are usually in the cast, but the standby is the one who would go on.
Like he's always available and ready if something happens, whereas nobody else in this cast has that luxury, which is kind of crazy.
Again, we were curious because I don't he's working, he's doing a lot, but I don't know if he's doing standby level a lot.
No,
versus everyone else in the cast.
I actually don't want to talk about Isaac here because I think we'll get there. Gatsby is someone that doesn't even show up in this musical until literally, he's there at the beginning, but then we don't see him again until halfway through Act 1. But I do want to talk about my standout actor in this Gatsby, who is Ben Levi Ross as Nick. We've never seen him in anything, but obviously very familiar with him as a person. Watched many a Dear Evan Hansen video that he's been in. We kept up with his previous relationship when it was on, and he's just kind of someone that's like been in the industry off and on. Like he's very young. He's been
90, working. He's working.
I don't know
96,
what year
98, 98.
98. Yeah. So he's been working for how young he is. But what had impressed both of us so much is, again, we'll speak on this a little bit later, but recently the cast recording for the Jason Robert Brown musical The Connector came out, and both you and I were like, is that Ben Levi Ross singing? Because I cannot believe that that's Ben Levi Ross.
No, he sounds different to me based on previous stuff we'd heard.
More mature, more
really
like rich, deeper. Like he's really like honing in on his like deeper vocal tones. I thought that he was incredible in this show. And he really is there for almost the entirety of the musical because, as you said, in this version, Nick is truly our narrator. And I just thought that he was so like captivating to watch. It also probably helped that we were in the front row so I could like really pay attention to everything that he was doing.
We got facial expressions from every single person.
But he was like acting, and then he was singing, and then he was crying. Like it was so.
I know, he really cried at the end. I was like, what a tear!
Good.
A tear at the end.
Like to the point that I was upset that he didn't bow last.
He didn't bow last
in the curtain.
We've talked about what order they should bow. It's hard because it's called The Great Gatsby, so Gatsby kind of has to bow last. He also dies, so you kind of gotta bow last. He was cracking me up. What I've been doing the whole week since we saw it is imitating him in the scene where it's hot in here, where they have glasses of water and they're just like, he's holding it to like different parts of his face to cool down. I'm like, what a choice. You're giving comedy in the background of the scene. Correct. No, it's funny. It's so good. Because he's in the background of a lot of scenes, he's active participant, but then he'll also, you'll look over and he'll still be on stage because again, we're watching it through his eyes. And just the acting choices he's making while watching would, be accurate to the character, but also be cracking me up. Like, just I think just like so many funny, great choices that he was making the whole time.
And I would say that his standout song is the finale, which is "We Beat On."
We Beat On.
Steph was crying.
Yeah. I was crying. Well, it sounded really powerful in there.
It was so powerful.
Really, really loud.
The ensemble really sounds really good.
The ensemble was ensembling. Like, they were singing together really loud. I was moved.
Okay, then let's go to, like, his counterpart friend, Ellery Ward as Jordan. This was an exciting casting when it was announced because she's kind of, like, made a name for herself in the musical theater space I guess like since the pandemic, right? Because that's when she was recording all of those and releasing those videos on TikTok.
Her album came out about 3-ish years ago, which is, I can't remember what it's called, but it's kind of folk covers of Sondheim songs that I've talked about on the podcast before. Really, really beautiful. Would recommend listening to. And she also, because of that, you know, went on tour opening for Josh Groban, went on her own solo tour. And so has not really done a lot of theater work, though I know that's what she went to school for and is like trying to do. But has mostly in the past few years, like, you know, made money and made, you know, stayed in public consciousness by being on TikTok and performing music and performing shows like as herself and not so much as a character. So it is interesting when she got cast in this, or I follow her on TikTok, we see her on TikTok, and she had been talking about auditioning for this show and how she'd go on in and out and just talking about, you know, what's meant for you will come for you, and, you know, not getting something and being like having to let it go. And when she was announced in the cast, talking about this show that I'd been talking about was Gatsby. And she, you know, she talked really about the full audition process for it. She talked about going in for Daisy, going in for Jordan, not getting it, going back in for Daisy, thinking she was going in for Jordan. And they're like, actually, can you do the Daisy material? And then she's like, okay, I can do that. And then when she got cast, not knowing which part she was going to be cast for, and she released her audition video, like her first self-tape. So she really like brought us as TikTok followers into the process of getting involved in this show.
She's actually the only one that's given us any insight into this production.
Literally.
Nobody else has done anything for us.
Something interesting, because after we saw it, I went back and was watching her TikTok videos to kind of get more insight. And one of the things, she released her self-tape, or her first audition, where she sang Cosmic Love by Florence and the Machine to audition for this show. And someone commented like, oh, bold to sing Florence for Florence. And she said, we were given a few Florence songs to pick from. So it sounds like everyone sang a Florence song for the auditions, which I want to know more about that. What songs were they given? What songs did they think encapsulated the show to give to the characters to sing, to give to the actors to sing? Like, tell me more. What other songs could you choose from? Who sang what? I need to know.
I will say her voice, if anyone's heard her voice, like obviously outside of this production, like she has a stunning voice, but it really suits this kind of music. It's almost like she has such a like cry to her voice. It's a little like folksy, which I think is like a lot of this score has like this score is, I feel like, crosses multiple genres in my opinion, but she suits the Florence music really well. I was also gonna say that knowing that she went in for Daisy and seeing what we saw, I actually don't think she would have been right for Daisy at all.
She's the Daisy understudy. She's a Daisy understudy, which is interesting.
But again, once it transfers, I don't think that would be a thing.
I agree, because why would you have one of your other principal characters?
Yes, that's so much for somebody to know.
But yeah, I just think like things get kind of fuzzy. I doubt she'll go on as Daisy in this run, because she's also like the second understudy, it seems. Yeah. So
the other thing too, just to again bring in that other Gatsby, as I said, this Gatsby builds out Myrtle, whereas the other Gatsby kind of builds out Jordan a little bit more. And this version that we just saw is not as like built out of a Jordan piece. She's kind of more of like a side character. But I remember you saying before we went that like she's barely in this. She's here. She's just like maybe not doing as much as we have the vision of what like Sam Polly was doing, you know?
Which Sam Polly was doing a lot. I think, you know, I heard people being like, she's a little underused. And I actually think she was used the perfect amount.
She was used the perfect amount.
She was used fine. I think we saw the perfect amount of Jordan.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
She sings the really fun.
Is it just a little party?
I think so. It's like the introduction to like Gatsby's parties. She's like leads that number because Jordan's obviously like been to parties before type thing. Next,
One Heartbeat. Is it One Heartbeat? Fun.
Yes, it's One Heartbeat. Yeah. Next, let's quickly go to Adam Grouper, who is Maya Wolf.
That is a princess track if I've ever seen one.
But like, congrats to him, because one song that he sang, which is
he's giving
like
Teen
Hell.
Angel.
He was so good though, and honestly, so many of the people's Reddit responses was like that was their favorite part. And it's interesting because that song is the most Broadway of the entire score. So
yes, absolutely. Even the staging of it, you know, it's a tap number. We're tap dancing. We're doing a soft shoe. We're not having that metal. But yes, that is giving the most performance of all the numbers, which I think makes sense because he is kind of teaching Gatsby how to perform, how to play this character, how to become Jay Gatsby.
Yeah. You basically see Gatsby comes out in his like war, or at that point he's not even Gatsby, he's just Jay, because in this version he's not Jay Gats, which is the book version.
They call him like Jimmy at some point. Someone calls him like Jimmy.
Yeah.
At some point.
But he's like doesn't have a last name in this production.
Gatsby is not his name, which is revealed later. It's made up.
But he builds him into this character, so you see him change from like the war outfit to like the pink suit. We got to work on that linen, guys. We have to work on the linen.
Yes. What we discovered at one point, it's in Act 1. He has he does like quick costume changes, and the military outfit goes over his pink linen suit, and there's a boot involved in it. And at one point, because he wears it twice, I think it was worse after the second time he wears it, which is like the long like Daisy Gatsby backstory scene.
Yeah.
The love story, like month of love scene, when he comes out of the boots and he's back in his pink suit, the bottom like half of his pant is just wrinkled, and I'm like, ooh, we got to do something about that, because like I was like drawn to it. I thought it had maybe gotten wet because like Daisy is like in the bathtub at that point, so I was like, did it get wet? Is that why it's so wrinkly? But I think it's just in the boots for too long and doesn't make it. But Act 2, she's pressed. She looks good again.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to Myrtle and Wilson. So Wilson, played by Matthew Amira. Unfamiliar. Never seen this man before.
You loved him.
I thought he was so cute. But he was very good. We see him like not kind of a lot in Act 1, but then he kind of disappears for a while. Like he's only there when Myrtle's there. Actually, that's not true, because she's there a lot more than he is. He's just like the side piece to Myrtle, right? Like
he's Myrtle's husband, and you do get a bit of backstory on him. The backstory of George and Myrtle, Wilson and Myrtle, is a lot more fleshed out in this musical, which really gives both of them a lot to like bite into and say. Like, I would say even in the book, they're very much side characters or plot devices kind of to, represent things, and he's a bit more of, I think, like a fool in the book. Even Myrtle, I think, is a lot more fleshed out. They give these characters the backstory that, they lost their child to the Spanish flu, and because they could not afford the care for this child, and that's kind of what drove, Myrtle to be seeking, a rich man, or seeking more money and climbing in a way that drives their marriage apart, which I don't think is direct from the book. I think that is added backstory and something that, like, when they're explaining and they're talking about, you're like, oh, so interesting, this like theme of not being able to afford healthcare and it being like a second class, or like a privilege only, or something that only people can afford. And so, but what I mean is by giving them that backstory, that really gives both of them, like Soleil Pfeiffer and Matthew Amira, so much to like bite into and really like act. Whereas I think in other adaptations, or even in the book, she has a husband, to have a husband, not necessarily because we like get to know him as a character.
It's funny because I was looking up the obviously Baz Luhrmann version of The Great Gatsby, because I was like, who played Wilson? I know it was Isla Fisher that played Myrtle, but I was like, who played Wilson? Because I feel like I don't even like remember. It was Jason Clarke, who is an amazing actor. And I feel like he was probably very underused, and they could have used a backstory like this for someone who's such a great actor in the movie. But that movie was really just like Leo Toby.
It was giving Baz.
Yeah. It's interesting because I agree with you that they built up these characters so much that it feels like they have so much more to lose. But then when we get to those moments that they lose everything, it's kind of like, wah. So
yes, I mean, that was, coming out, that was like my main critique, I think, but like, getting there.
But in terms of like casting these two, Soleil has never sounded better in her life. She sounds
so great. So powerful. Like, so she gets to really belt. She gets to really belt and sing, like come to the front of the stage and just sing in a way that I don't know if she's like had the chance to be like as gritty before in the stuff that she's worked on. Like, I don't know about.
She just did Hadestown, which is kind of similar.
Right, a bit more.
To me, she kind of like parallels Gatsby in that like he's also a mixed race person, but he's at the top and she's at the bottom, and he's everything that she wants to be but isn't. And I think we see that when like she's a maid at his party, she's serving him like a drink, and then you obviously see the like downfall of her in Act 2. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that like her and Wilson are wearing red and he's wearing pink, and like he's able to, you know, he's trying to blend into like the upper echelons of society, which is like the white, but he still has that like little tinge of red making him pink, whereas they can't blend in at all, so they have that full red. Like I think that representation, I think that's what they're doing with that, maybe.
Yeah, I
like
agree.
Having them both be in these like reddish, like whether pink or red, like does draw that parallel. And even when like Daisy wears pink just a little bit, and I think that like also parallels her to Myrtle in that way, like two women kind of in these uncontrollable situations.
Well, Daisy's pink, I think,
without
is
a lot
really
of power.
Interesting because she doesn't get pink until she's touched by Gatsby, which I think is really a smart.
She has that like sash of pink when he's like remembering her.
But they've met because that goes back to that first time when they're like have their first kiss. So like she's been touched by him, and he envisions her in the pink. So it's like
pink,
kind of
and she's also like not dirty in that dress.
In that scene, yeah.
In that scene, yes, like because she's perfect in a memory, you know, she's not
right.
real.
But speaking of Daisy,
and also not to say, but Gatsby is not dirty in his military outfit. I don't think.
No. It's hard to tell, honestly, because the pants
hard to tell,
are
the
rolled
boots are
up in
black.
the boot, so the pants wouldn't be dirty because we can't see them.
I don't think like in that like month of love sequence, I don't think they're dirty.
Yeah. But speaking of Daisy, a newcomer, I think, to the scene, Charlotte McInnes, who, oh my God, what a gorgeous voice she has. I could literally listen to her sing all day.
The Golden Girl.
That's the only thing that we have in our memory from the score. And
which was early. It was early in the show.
It was like, it's song 2. Like, it's such a standout moment for her. Also, I thought that, like, one, she's absolutely stunning and, like, played the innocence of Daisy very well. She also had incredible chemistry with Isaac Powell, which obviously helps that, like, little bit of the love story that we do get into. Don't get me wrong. They do go into the love story, but in the sense of, like, the book where it feels like a little, ooh, like, I don't know, should we be cheering for this? You're kind of like, oh, my God, like, I want more of this, because they're so like there's scenes when they are like making out for like multiple moments. They're having sex on the staircase, but it's like, this is everything that I asked for from the other Gatsby, and this gave me that. So I do think like the chemistry between these two is what helps her Daisy feel so devastating when she just decides to like cut him off at the end.
Yeah, it is. It's just like, it's a bit grittier, like like getting that more, getting to see that like longer backstory of how they met, how they came together, and then also the backstory of how she ended up marrying Tom.
I've changed my mind number.
I've changed my mind, like you know, she hadn't heard from Gatsby, so she's like marrying this other guy. She has to, and then she hears from Gatsby and she tries to change her mind, but she's not allowed. Like they don't allow her to change her mind, like showing her powerlessness in that moment, which I think is conveyed in like future moments of powerlessness. You have that backstory of seeing her, you know, try to take control of her life but not be able to, and not to take agency away from her, because I do think she does have agency in certain moments, but I don't think we can ignore the amount of powerlessness she has in her marriage to Tom and kind of the circumstances she is in, and that came along with that. And I think the show is like trying to explore that, like she has this privilege, but she also has this, like, she's also trapped, and trying to like explore that. And I think her innocence, like she comes across as quite young, Charlotte McInnes, and her vocally, I think like, there is an innocence. She is young, but not everyone who is young comes across as young. So like she conveys that, and even like her voice has this like sweetness and innocence to it that I think really like emphasizes the character of Daisy. I think it like really suits the characterization of Daisy in this production.
I also feel in the same way that I felt with Ellery Ward that Charlotte's voice really suited these Florence songs. I just think it's interesting because when the casting was announced for this, we were like, oh, what an interesting choice to go with an unknown, but also like, oh, love this choice to go with an unknown because you have no pre-existing like thoughts about this person. Like, there was a moment when they said that Rachel Zegler was going to be Daisy, but then obviously knowing what we know about the color conscious casting, it could have never been Rachel Zegler.
Even like should we talk about the rumors? What about the sand?
Yeah.
Where's the sand?
Well, the sand
Where is the sand?
I actually never saw that rumor. Only you saw that rumor. So
I swear I saw the rumor about sand. Okay, I'm gonna need to find it.
It was probably like a Sweaty Oracle like rumor.
Maybe.
But
there
the
was
other
rumors
main
about like
casting,
Joshua Henry, like
which let's talk about this here again. That does not make sense for this casting. I also think, race aside, it's very interesting the way that they've cast. I mean, here's the main thing. When Isaac Powell was announced in this production, we were like, oh, he's Nick. There's no way that he's anybody but Nick. Sorry, we haven't even talked about Corey Giacoma, who, let's talk about you quickly because I feel like Isaac is a bigger section.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there in a
second.
second.
Is
Tom
in this production.
Great.
I actually think he's underused. I think he could be used a little bit more. I would like, actually, well, the song that he sings with Daisy of The Damage That You Do is probably his like standout moment in the show.
I think as a scene throughout the musical, that is one of the strongest scenes. That like argument between, you know, Tom and Daisy after Myrtle has died and kind of everything goes out in the open. They've both been like having these affairs. They both know about it, but they both are kind of like trapped in this marriage a little bit. When he threw his shoes off stage, I was like, yes, this is what I've been like, this kind of like danger is this level of danger is what I've been missing a little bit, which maybe we'll talk about, but like, and that fight kind of between them and them like talking about each other. It reminded me almost of the fight in, what's the movie called? Nominated for Oscars this year. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Anatomy of a Fall. It reminded me almost of like the fight in Anatomy of a Fall where they're like both wrong and both right and both horrible. And I was like, okay. Like for me, one of the strongest scenes and like his acting.
The other time that there's
really
like danger from him is in that like when they all go into the city and Gatsby says to Daisy, tell him that you never loved him. You kind of, they like physically
they're
into
fighting.
It.
He grabs Daisy, he grabs Myrtle, he grabs both of them arm. Like in Act 1 as well. And like I wish it was like a bit more.
Yeah.
I was reading the book in chapter 2, he breaks Myrtle's nose when they're in the hotel in that.
Yes,
in the
I
apartment.
actually remember that like vividly.
Like and I kind of wish like obviously we don't want like I don't know how you show that. It's hard to show in theater when you can't actually be hurting people. But I do wish we felt that like more like unhinged violence from him.
So interesting
than we did feel in the show.
Our previous episode on Tina was too much violence.
Well, because the goal of that show, like because at the end of this show, I want to be unsettled, whereas at the end of Tina, like I don't want to be unsettled. You know what I mean? Like the goals of the show are just different.
They're also non-comparable at all. But yes,
like, you can't compare. You can't compare. But yeah, like the goals of the show are different, and I really just wanted to feel like more danger from him.
Yeah.
And just kind of more unhingedness. Like
the
he was
comedy,
very good. Corey Giacoma was really, really good in this, but I think maybe like a booked or a staging issue. Like I just want to feel more like like on edge.
Yeah, that's why I think he was like slightly underused in this. There are many scenes that like
somebody in the face.
Tom is not there for. But the comedy of this is that Corey Giacoma may be the nicest person we've ever met.
He was very nice at the autograph line.
So sweet. Okay, but let's talk about Isaac Powell. So again, this was announced that, I mean, there were rumors spiraling that Isaac Powell was in this production of Gatsby. It was just a matter of who he was going to be. When it was announced that he was going to be in it, when the rumors came out, we were like, he's 100% Nick. There's no way that this man is Gatsby. I just don't believe that he's a Gatsby. And after seeing this production, is he a Gatsby? I don't know that he's a Gatsby in the terms of what Gatsby's character is in the whole of the property of A Great Gatsby, but I think that he is a Gatsby in this specific production of Gatsby.
So here's my read on it, my interpretation on it, and people can agree, disagree, but here's my interpretation on it. Gatsby is this like larger than life figure when people don't know him. But in this musical, Nick meets him and doesn't realize he's meeting Gatsby. He thinks he's just meeting another party goer. He doesn't realize that this regular man that he's just met is also this larger than life.
This is in the book as well, like the way that it happens.
Yes, I agree. I didn't get to that chapter. Sorry, everyone. But he doesn't realize that this regular man that he just met, who he thinks is just another party goer, is the same person as this larger than life mythical creature of Gatsby. And so you have this character that everyone knows and talks about and whispers about, and you also have the man. And I think Isaac is playing the man and not necessarily the mythical creature of Gatsby. That is this, like, you know, almost like a colloquial word that we use in everyday society to describe like so many things and parties and excess, but he is just kind of a regular guy in this extraordinary circumstance, if you will, and he is playing like the regular guy in that circumstance, as opposed to the giant myth that is Gatsby.
Mm-hmm. The other thing too is that, like, I don't think that Ben Levi Ross and Isaac Powell are necessarily the same type, but for lack of a better word, they are a similar type in this. And I think it's on purpose because there are many scenes that they kind of mirror each other, even right off the top.
Right at the beginning.
Gatsby's on the staircase holding his hand out. Nick is on the
reaching
floor
for that
speaking
green
to
light.
the audience, also reaching for that green light. So they're doing the same motions. But I agree that, like, again, this is a poor example because it's a new movie and not the, like, classic version that exists. But, like, when you think of the Baz Gatsby, like, Leonardo DiCaprio is Gatsby. That is the myth of Gatsby. That is one of the biggest names in Hollywood.
Which plays into, you know, him personally. Like,
yes.
they use the public reputation of Leonardo DiCaprio to portray something about Gatsby in that movie. Absolutely.
Whereas in this, as you said, like, he's just like without knowing him in fantasy sequence, it's like, oh my God, he must be this, like, incredible larger than life man. But when you actually meet him, he's like, oh, I'm Gatsby. And Nick is, like, taken back by that moment. But then he's also, like, becomes, like, obsessed with the fact that, like, oh, Gatsby's this regular guy, but he's also this man that, like, throws these parties. Why did he invite me specifically? Why is he inviting me to lunch? Is he flirting with me? Like, it's very loose in this. There's literally a moment in the bar that I'm like, are they going to kiss? Like, I think they're going to kiss because that's how they were interacting with each other.
When Gatsby invites Nick to lunch, like, based on what we've seen of the show already, of Nick, like, hooking up with a guy already in this show, are we as an audience supposed to read, does Nick think this is a date? Like, does Nick think he's asking him on a date? And we as an audience kind of know where this is going, if you will. But
I didn't know where that
Nick
was going.
No, but we as an audience know that Gatsby's obsessed with Daisy. You know what I mean? So we kind of know it's not a date necessarily. But Nick does not know that.
I think there could have been a boundary push there that Gatsby would have stopped at nothing to get to Daisy, whether that meant going through Nick in that sense to be like, I will. But they were more like friends than they were anything else in this production.
Yeah, like, he asked him to lunch and Nick's like right away like, yeah, let's go to lunch. Like, he's excited to go to lunch.
Yeah.
And then they go to lunch, they meet Mary Wolfsheim, they, like, get the Gatsby backstory. He's like, oh yeah, I'll go get a drink, and then he comes out, like, doing a
yeah.
Funny. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I'm back.
But in terms of this production, as I was saying, I do think that Isaac is correctly cast. Also, listen to our West Side Story episode. Listen to, like, every other time we've ever.
We're big fans.
We love Isaac Powell. We lusted over him in 2019 over his Maria in West Side Story. Like, I have been waiting to see that kind of performance again. And his Mr. Nobody from Nowhere, the Act 1 finale, we were like, okay, Isaac, welcome back.
He sounded really, really good. He sounded really, really good. I like his voice a lot, but I don't always love his voice, but I really loved how he sounded here.
Yeah.
I think it really, like, suited him. He's, like, again, we always talk about his physicality because I think just, like, the way his body is, like, shaped and moves really, like, adds to characters. He's, like, pretty tall and he's got, like, really long arms and he's, like, very lanky.
He also, like,
this, like,
works
curly hair
with his body to like, he's a very physical actor. So, like, when he's falling for Daisy, he's literally, like, drooping like closer to her. Like, he's a very physical actor, which I think really helps with this production. The other thing too is that, like, as we have said on previous episodes, as we were about to say here, like, Josh Henry was the rumor for this Gatsby.
So different.
I also think doesn't work for this specific storyline, the way that it is. And also, like, not to say, because I don't even know how old Josh Henry is, but everybody here feels like they're the exact same age, which feels right.
Everyone sits around like 25 to 30-ish in this, it seems. Maybe Tom's a little bit older, or like comes across a little bit older, but I think like keeping that story like young, like keeping the characters quite young. Like Nick says, I'm like, today's my birthday, I turned 30 years old, which is like a bit old for Ben Levi Ross. He's actually playing up, he's aging up. Maybe by the time this gets to Broadway, he'll be 30. 4 years. But yeah, I think keeping it like a bit of these like characters as youthful also represents this like the youthfulness of the American dream, when you're still like wide-eyed and hopeful about things before you've been downtrodden. I mean, you know, some of the characters have been downtrodden in certain ways, but having them be this, like, having this youthful energy and this youthful optimism does I think add to like this specific story we're telling.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and I don't know if this was like a direction, it must have been a direction choreography choice, but again, like, we as the audience know, well, we actually don't know who, no, we do. In the first moment, we know who Gatsby is because he's standing on the ledge, but like, you don't meet him until that first party scene. But what you do see... He's kept mysterious. Yeah, but what you do see is that like Isaac is stationed at the top of the staircase while the entire ensemble is like draping the staircase. This is in the One Heartbeat number. But like, as Jordan is singing, I don't know if you were paying attention to what Isaac was doing, but he was almost conducting the ensemble to do the movements that he wanted, which I think shows that like, you don't know who I am, but you will follow everything that I say.
But he's orchestrating these parties for a very specific purpose. He's orchestrating everyone there to try and, you know, get Daisy to attend.
On the flip side is when we have that number of Feels Like Hell, when we're like kind of building the character, it's almost as if like Wolfsheim is like puppeteering him to do these things. So now he is the puppet master for his parties. I just thought it was like a really interesting and smart like choreography choice to like flip the characters. Okay,
that's before that Sonia Taye movement, you know?
Yeah.
That's...
What were you saying about that everyone's calling this like interpretive dance, but you're like, this is not interpretive dance?
People, I was reading on Reddit. I want to hear what other people are saying. People calling it interpretive dance. People don't understand what interpretive dance is. This is modern contemporary. I would almost call this even concert dance, which is also what I would call like the last West Side Story, like concert dance. But this is I would say like modern contemporary jazz.
It's actually interesting genres. For Isaac to do that,
and a little bit
to do that West Side Story kind of like back to back with this, because they're kind of similar in like tone, versus like a big musical.
He loves to die at the end, you know. He's got to be killed by his girlfriend. Well, not quite, but he loves to be, you know, shot right at the end.
Yeah, he loves to be shot. Before we talk about the end here, let's talk about the best part, I think, of this musical, which is the music. We can't even give you any snippets. We can't even give you any lyrics. We can't give you anything because nothing exists. But what I can tell you is that this is such an amazing score, and it feels very different to like what's currently on Broadway.
Yes. We were trying to listen to Florence and the Machine albums after we saw it to try and get inspiration or think what this sounds like of hers, if it sounds like anything of hers. And I think we both settled on her album Ceremonials.
Which is what year is that?
2010. So a long time
ago.
We'd seen on Reddit someone say like Seven Devils, like Daisy and Tom fight scene kind of sounds like that. The song like No Light or like Spectrum on that album like really gave me. And then I was also listening to her first album, Cosmic Love. I don't know, there's songs that you can like, nothing is an exact
song
match.
From Gatsby that she did,
yes, which is called Something My Lover. Music from Baz Luhrmann's Blur Blur Blur. Over the Love. The moments where her album to me sounded most like it was when it had big background vocal sections. And I was like, okay, I'm getting the same energy that I was getting. It's hard also because I will say I have not been able to hum a single thing from this show.
Which is crazy
And
because every review on Reddit is like, I cannot stop humming these. I can't get these songs out of my head. And I'm just like, I don't understand.
I loved it while I was hearing it.
And maybe that's on us.
I cannot wait to hear it again. No.
Maybe we should have opened up our phones in intermission to just hum a voice note so that I could have it separately. You know? Like, maybe that's on us. But
no, I agree. Next time, if I have an underpouch, I'm like, not even, yes, next time when I'm out of town, at intermission, I am singing what I can sing into my phone. Because, yes, there's, like, nothing out there of it. And I just know when I was hearing it, I was, like, loving it. And you're just trying to take everything in. And there are, like, feelings that I remember and, like, choreographic movements that I remember and just like hearing people's voices that I remember, but I cannot hum a melody to save my life from this. So maybe that's a criticism. I don't know. It's not necessarily a criticism, but I do think it's interesting to say that But that's what I'm saying, why
it's so interesting, because everybody else seems to know it all. So I'm like, what did we not retain that everybody else? It's that opening number. It's the Welcome to the New World. Is kind of the theme
Where's
throughout.
The party and can you take
not
me
that.
there?
That's the other.
I know.
And that's the thing. Like to like juxtapose, like that is such a hummable, catchy,
it's an earworm,
modern
but also
Broadway
because I've heard it
score.
30 times on TikTok today. You know what I mean?
100%.
Because it's earworming, whereas these I heard one time and I'm just trying to plug my ears so it doesn't fall out because I'm stuck.
If you could compare, I guess like in the last, I mean whenever, but like, is there a Broadway score out there that you think is like slightly comparable to what we've heard?
Oh wow, that's
or does
a really
this feel like
question.
Completely like original and brand new? The only thing that I could like ever so slightly compare is just based on like vibes, but like Hadestown would be the closest comparison, but I don't think that Hadestown sounds like this. I just think like
so.
General vibes. It's the only like dark grungy musical that's been on Broadway in the last 5 years.
What about Comet? What do you think about Comet?
No, I don't think it sounds like Comet at all. No. I think again in terms of like
it has vibe. Vibe.
It has vibes in terms of like storyline, like,
and it's the same director as well. So as is Hadestown, like it's all the same director.
Sound wise, I don't know. I think this is like, and it's interesting to say this because obviously there's been, specifically this past season of Tonys, there's been a lot of like original scores that have come out. This is so original.
What about Ghost Quartet?
Yeah.
Like, you know, another Dave Malloy.
Just for like breathiness, gritty. I don't know. This is it's very ominous. It's very mysterious.
Super
very
ominous, which I love.
Drum beat
I love
heavy. I saw a Reddit that was like, let's get a harp in there. It's like, okay, let's get a harp in there. Like, let's see.
Did I send you Heavy in Your Heart from Florence and the Machine? Where
so.
Like the ensemble is like, I'm so heavy. Like that was kind of like giving me energy of this musical. Like nothing sounds exactly like melody, but it was just like energy matches. And there are some songs, I sent you one, I think, and you're like, oh, this sounds like the Myrtle song. And I was like, I don't know if it sounds like anything, but I can imagine someone hearing this Florence and the Machine song and thinking she can write a musical.
But I will say, like, if you're craving that like original score from a new musical, I think this is what people are maybe looking for. And I wouldn't say like, if you're not a Florence fan, I don't think that this would turn you off, because I just think it's really interesting sounding music in general, and so different.
I agree. And also, if you don't like Florence, she has such a specific voice, and obviously that voice is not going to be in these songs. Like, I love her voice, but not everyone loves her voice. So if the voice is the turnoff, I think the songs would still be good. But again, it's not like a classic musical theater show, so if I know someone who loves classic musical theater, I wouldn't necessarily be like, gotta see this. I was like, there's a Gatsby for everyone, and that's the answer.
Yes, exactly.
This is the Gatsby, I think, for me, but it's not the Gatsby for everyone.
Let's talk about the end, then we'll do the disappointments, then we'll rate it, and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so the end. I think this is the most interesting book choice as a whole, because it did kind of leave a like, oh, that's so interesting moment, like a little bit of a gasp at the end, and then also really brings it into modern America, Canada even, the world today. So do you want to give us the end of this musical?
Yes, absolutely. So after...
Spoilers, by the way.
Spoilers. After Gatsby has died and Nick is in his home kind of preparing for his funeral, and no one has arrived. And one of the only people to arrive is a man who we learn is Gatsby's father. So when he walks onto stage, it is very, very clearly based on the attire that he is wearing and the way his hair is, that this is like a Native American man, an indigenous man. And he introduces himself as Gatsby's, Gatsby's father. I think he calls him Jimmy. At a point earlier in the show, right before Gatsby dies, Nick says something to him, and he said, Gatsby, that's not my name. I made the whole thing up. Like, I made it up. And that's like the first clue of the kind of the facade. Well, you know about the facade he's put on, but that's kind of one of the first clues of this moment.
I think that's the scene when he's like, I'm waiting, will Daisy
waiting
call?
for Daisy.
And right, he says, yes, she would obviously call because you're Gatsby.
She's not calling. Honey.
I'm not.
She's
who's
not
Gatsby?
Call. She's not calling. Yeah, he's like, he made that name up. Like, that's not who we am. It is totally a facade. As is so much of him. And then to see, when his father arrives and reveals to the audience and reveals to Nick that, he is not who we thought he was. He is indigenous to the United States. He's Native American, and that is something that he hid from himself in an attempt to fit in with this society, and it's something that he almost did but never quite did. Like, to even expand upon this, we didn't even talk as much about like new money and old money in here, and that like no matter how much money Gatsby had, he will never have always had money, and that is like the ultimate crime. And it comes out in the scene where they're like fighting in the hotel room, and Nick and Gatsby says to Daisy, tell him you never loved him and you always loved me, because he can't, like, it's not enough that he has money now, it's not enough that she loves him now. Like, it had to be always, and it will never be always. And
also
that is
in
like,
that scene, Tom's like, he can't provide for you the way that I can.
Mm-hmm. Well, because his money is from, let's say, like nefarious ways. Like the old money will always, or not always, but even if the person with more new money has more money now, it will never have as much status as someone who has always had money, who is generational wealth. And like, I don't know, really interesting stuff. So when his father comes in and it is revealed to the audience that he is indigenous to this land and he has been passing as white and has been, attempting to fit in, I think it really drove home that point, especially talking about, we're really like delving into America, and that's why it's subtitled like An American Myth. It delves into, and this is the only character that we've seen that does not have rust and dirt on the bottom of their costume, on the bottom of their clothing, because they are kind of not implicated in the same way as every other character in the show. And it like, I'm so interested to hear interviews about how we came to this book. And like, I want to read everything about this, but it was like so impactful. I don't even have like a fully formed thought, but I was like, oh, yeah. wow.
Yeah,
I was like,
I agree.
Not shock was not the right word, but I was like my breath was taken away by that story point.
This is a storyline that is not in the book. So this is written off of the pages of the book.
So not to like delve, but I was reading about the book, and Scott Fitzgerald based Gatsby on this other man who kind of did a similar thing through these extravagant parties, not necessarily for a girl, but like through these extravagant parties, and didn't use his real name, but he also was German, and that's why he had the last name Gatz in the book, which was like a German last name. So he was based on a German person who like F. Scott Fitzgerald knew of and was real. So this is actually like extremely different, was still like, was not part of the old money of the United States, but not in quite the same way that the Gatsby in this specific production and narrative is.
It was foreshadowed to us at the beginning when they're talking about like the Indians and the Italians, but obviously not in a way that like we would pick up that this is how they end this story, because again, not based on the subject material. But it's so interesting because we, again, in the like 6 Reddit posts that exist from this show, like no one's talking about this, and I'm like, this is like, forget everything else that we watched. You can love the music, you can love the acting, but like, why aren't we talking about this like bigger moment? Except for, again, shout out to Dylan from Theme Park Entertainment, who tweeted,
we consume.
Literally,
we're watching it all.
he said, Gatsby spoilers, I need to see more people talking about the fact they made Gatsby explicitly white passing Indigenous American because it's such a genius choice. And like, I literally agree. And again, like, these are the type of things that like, there should be a talkback performance. There should be,
I know. And I'm assuming
I want to
we'll
see the
get
whole
that kind of stuff.
documentary. I want to see the whole documentary based on this. Like, I need to speak to Martina about this choice. Was it her
really
alone? And then the other
like,
thing,
where did
it
this
left
come
us
from?
like, it left us in two frames of mind. My first frame of mind is like, this is so smart, and this makes this story that's 100 years old
Like,
so
really
relevant
rich,
to
so
today.
rich.
And two, is Isaac Powell half Indigenous? Because
Then we had
didn't know.
we were googling, which is interesting because we don't want everyone leaving a show being like, and what is the racial makeup of every actor in this show?
No, but I
Like,
do
it's just
think
a
that
little-
I shouldn't we shouldn't have to do that. But I think when you bring in such a storyline that's so important and so like widely discussed in today's world of like who came first type thing, like you need to correctly cast this. And we've talked about this off the mic of like, that should mean that your understudies also need to be correctly cast
100%.
because if you're going to the lengths of making this incredibly important ending, it needs to be correctly cast. And because this production is so casting conscious, it should be something that's at like top of mind. And obviously it was for casting Isaac in this production. I just think it's a really, really smart way to end your show. And by doing this, it leaves us with what I always am searching for in a play, in a musical, in whatever, is to have conversation. This is the first time in a long time that a show has provoked me to want to have more conversations. Yet there's zero information out there.
I know.
It's like, I want to talk to other people that have seen this. I want to hear other people's opinions. I want to know why they did this specifically for this show. Like, I have a million questions that will hopefully be answered in due time.
I also want to shout out on TikTok as well. I can't remember her at. I think it's like CUNY TV, but like that's her. What's her? Her at is like not Kristen Bell. She's like blonde. She's like a dramaturg on TikTok. She saw it as well, and she has a bunch of TikToks talking about Gatsby. And something she said that I also want to reiterate is like, this show right now is not perfect, but it's in really good shape. Like, I'm feeling like really good about the future of it. There are things that we're gonna like talk about that I think could be, you know, moved around, shifted, changed. You know, I'm sure there will be new songs and new lyrics and they'll move stuff around, but the bones of the show, like, it's in such good shape, and I cannot wait to see what it does next. And I cannot wait to see this show again. And sometimes you see it out of town and you're like, I've seen enough of that. And this one, I'm like, I cannot wait to see it again. I cannot wait to listen to these songs again. I need more. I cannot wait to read every interview from the cast and creative team about every choice made in this show, watch every behind the scenes video. I just want to like consume more and more and more and learn more about it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
But I also think like it's been kind of a long time since like you've been this excited about like a property. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's hard to get excited about stuff now. I was like, okay, what are our favorite things we've seen this year so far? We're about halfway through the year. And I would count this as one of my favorite things I've seen during this year. The other thing would probably be Comet, to be honest.
Yeah.
And those are kind of maybe the top two of the year, but at this time, I don't think it's coincidental that this specific production of Comet is not Rachel Chapkin directed, but that original production of Comet was Rachel Chapkin directed. Like,
but so interesting because you hated Hadestown.
You're right. I did not like Hadestown at all. So interesting. So interesting. That was more of I would say a book issue for me in Hadestown.
Mm-hmm. I think that, in my opinion, there's only two things that make this production not almost perfect for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's the death scenes, all three death scenes,
yes.
For Myrtle, Wilson, and Gatsby. Now, I don't know
100%.
if that's like due to like stage limitations,
or because we were really close for Myrtle's
No, not even that. I
specifically.
just mean like in general of the theater itself, if like they want to do something more, but they can't because of the stage limitations. I only think that Myrtle's scene was obstructed to us from where we were sitting. The other two, it's very simple.
Not even obstructed. It was just too close. And when you're watching someone pretend to die in slow motion for a long time, like right in front of their face, it's just corny. And it came across like really corny from like right there. But also, I just think we can do something different. I don't know what exactly, and that's why I'm not being paid the big bucks. But
someone said that they would like to see her like fall through a trap door. They can do that car scene again, but instead of her just like topple over, she like
this
descends.
is the thing. They like having her body there because then Tom comes and sees it. So I don't know, and I know she gets like kind of like 2 cars swerve. I don't know.
You could have that impact and have that moment without someone being on stage too. Like, we're suspending our disbelief here a little bit.
No,
so,
I know,
I don't know
but
that she necessarily physically needs to be on stage.
I think they like,
in my
because
opinion.
even after Wilson and Gatsby die, they're both lying there for people to see it. Like, I think they like having the physical manifestation of what happened to them being there for you to see. Even though it was destructive for us because they were on the ground.
When Isaac was shot, well, we could see Isaac because he was on a platform.
He was on the platform. He was up top.
When Isaac was shot in West Side Story, he also stayed on stage. His dead body was
you want to see
on
the body.
Stage.
You want to see the body. You don't want to hide it or glamorize it. You want to see that body, and you want to be upset.
I don't really remember. Again, like, I will say, I know we are comparing, not comparing, but I do think that the death scenes in the other Gatsby are better, but I also think that their production value is just like so stupidly high that they really have money to do things.
That particular production is so melodramatic that they nailed kind of the melodrama of those deaths really well.
I don't really remember how Myrtle dies though. Like, that didn't
I remember the song
she
sang right before it, and then I think it was similarly like lights and fog and whatever. Yes, even the 3 deaths, I think, and I think that translates before to, I want all the violence in this show to just feel a little more intense. I want it to feel a little less stage and just a bit more like visceral for the audience. I want them to feel like they're getting physically harmed. And also, I like the song that Wilson sings as he's going to like shoot
it's very literal.
Gatsby and kill himself. It is very literal, but I think I just want to like the motivations to be made like slightly clearer. Like, I think you in that moment, I did say like, oh, they're spelling things out a little too much. I think you actually need to spell it out like a little bit more there, because it's slightly convoluted. It's like, why does he think this is the guy versus like, but I feel like you just need to like, I think it just, because it's justifying a murder-suicide, it needs to be super clear why decisions are being made.
I said this to you when we were discussing it, but like, Wilson actually doesn't know what Gatsby looks like. He just knows that that's where he lives.
He knows that's where he lives.
He's the only person. Right, but it could have actually been anybody that he shot, because he has no idea what he looks like.
And the character is like angry and is just kind of looking for, he's disenfranchised, and this is something that I saw not Kristen Bell on TikTok talk about, like what radicalizes people, and like how can you be shocked when Wilson has been radicalized by the murder, by the death of his child due to lack of funding, and then the death of his wife due to just like carelessness and people just walking away with no consequences. And like, super interesting. And I think like let's delve deeper into that, like talk about what feels that he has been driven to do because of the circumstances that he's been put in.
I actually do like the way that Gatsby dies. I just wish that there was more impact, because obviously you've heard us talk about, but the pool scene in the other Gatsby is the best part of that entire musical.
Highlight.
It is so good. Like, he rolls off into the orchestra pit. Like, it's amazing. The pool is non-existent in this version of Gatsby, which I actually think it's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter here or there if the pool itself is in there.
I agree that we don't need the pool.
But something I did like about Gatsby's death scene is that, like, there's the moment, obviously the shirts, which is the iconic like scene in every iteration of the Great Gatsby. In this one, Nick's singing a number about like all of the different types of shirts and colors, and they're just like throwing them off of the balcony.
It's like in Barbie. Whatever. It's like, not the palazzo pants.
No, it's literally like in Joseph when they're going through all the colors of the coat. Like, that's what was happening.
I liked that the ensemble was passing them down and that they were being caught by people. Like, I love that use the ensemble there.
Yeah, so that was really good. So then I literally like knew what was going to happen when it happened, because I was like, oh, they're going to use the same imagery of the shirt, which I do think is really smart. So like, basically Wilson is like singing this big song, and then Gatsby is like getting changed, I guess like getting ready for bed on the top of the stairs, and he takes off his vest, and then he takes off his shirt, and he's like holding and looking at the shirt, and then he throws it up like one last time, and that's when he's shot and he falls down, which I'm like, fall down, roll off into a pit. Like, let's go. Like, make it dramatic. I want to see you fall from, like, height. Like, I want to see that.
I just don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they'll ever do it. I want more drama. I want more drama.
In this specific theater, there's absolutely no way that they could have done that. He's on a barricaded stair. There's no way that he can roll off into anywhere. So it's just like not doable anywhere else. Wilson's, I think, is even more anticlimactic because he shoots himself and then just falls backwards and then lies on stage.
It's hard.
I'm sure... I actually do think they can change it because I do think that that's really the only critique that's coming out of this production. People want like, more tension and more anger towards the deaths. And if they're doing any sort of like reading online of what people are saying, like that's the one thing that people do not like. And if that's the only thing, I feel like it's a pretty easy, let's go back to the drawing board situation to figure out. It's the like biggest plot point. It's the climax of the book. Like you got to figure this out. It has to feel more impactful because the end, that final song felt more impactful than any of the deaths.
Loved the final song. Yes. And okay, when Myrtle died also, I was thinking of Smash when Kyle died, when it's just like the two lights. And I was like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, it feels budget.
That one I actually think we might have been impacted by where we were sitting. Because I agree to know what like 10 rows back felt. Someone also said like, let's amp up the fog machine. Let's make it more like
so we're not really we're not seeing as much of her, seeing less of her because we're really seeing her act. We're really seeing her act in slow-mo, and I never think that works well.
Not to bring in Hadestown again, but just like Rachel Chapkin in general, that look back moment when like Eurydice descends into the ground is a gasp in the entire theater. So like Rachel. Put on your Hadestown hat and bring it into this production.
We need to gasp. We need to gasp when Myrtle dies. And I know we know it's coming, but we need something. Also, like I mean, like a nitpick, but the scene where the car comes out of the set, which I audibly was like,
said that out loud.
I was like, I don't like
from
that.
The front row.
I know. I was like, oh no. But like half a car comes out, and then Tom and Jordan and Nick kind of lean against it, and I'm like, I think we could have just imagined the car. I don't know if we need the car to come out. Just like the hood of a car came out. Ugly.
They needed something to sit on. They needed to represent the Rolls Royce, which is the most important car. But it actually wasn't necessary. They could have, the car lights were there. They could have just turned on those headlights instead of like made it
something like that.
Come out.
Yeah. I don't know. I just felt like a little...
You budget on a moving car, but you couldn't spend your budget on a trapdoor? Like, come on.
It just felt like a little, like, chintzy, like, to have, like, a quarter of a car come out. I don't know. And I don't want the full car to come out, because whenever a full car drives out, I hate that, usually, too.
The cars in the other Gatsby were so good, though.
They were too much. Honestly, what cracks me up is that the other Gatsby, when Jeremy and Eva showed up to the premiere in the car out front, and they're, like, waving, and I'm like, has anyone read this book? Has anyone seen the musical? They kill somebody with this car. like are we do we understand? Do we know what's happening? And they're just like, yes, we're in the car. I'm like, what are we doing? What are we doing? So yeah.
Okay.
I just want my number one critique.
Yeah, go ahead.
My number one critique is I just want the intense moments to feel more intense.
This is a very long episode of just like a smattering of thoughts here and there, but like I feel like we are the only people that have
this is in depth. Okay.
No, but also like we're the only people that have an audio review of this production. So we really just want to serve the people out there because everybody else's audio review is on a 30-second TikTok. Okay, so final thoughts before we rate it.
Final thoughts. It's in really good shape. It's in really good shape that I think, you know, speaking of it as something that is still a work in process, I can't wait to see what it does next. It's in really good shape. It's ready to like keep moving. It's exciting me. I can't wait to see it again. I can't wait to hear music from it. I can't wait to consume every piece of media that they put out about this, which gets me excited. So I'm really happy with where they're at with it right now.
My final thoughts on this musical is that it's everything that I wanted the other Gatsby to be. So I'm happy that I was fan served in that way. But I agree, it's in very good shape. As I said at the beginning of this episode, the pacing is really well done. And then as we've talked about all the way through, like this score is so good. From what I barely remember of it, it is so good and so original, which I think is just, it's really exciting when something doesn't feel like it's ripping off 10 other productions that are already existing. So yeah, it's very exciting. I'm very happy with all the people that are in this cast as well. So I hope that they do get to continue on with whatever the next iteration of the show is. And I don't know when we'll see it on Broadway, but they do have that Instagram handle. So it's eventually going to come.
They're working on it. Imagine it never goes, and they just have to be Gatsby.
They just like bought the handle. Yeah. Okay, what are you going to rate this?
Okay, this is hard because like I really loved it. It's also more in process. Like I don't want to go too high, but at the end of the day, it's just about feeling. These are very unscientific ratings. So how I felt about this show, I'm gonna go 8 out of 10 green lights.
I'm also gonna go 8 out of 10. I think it's very, very close to a 9, but it's not 100% there yet. This one it's very close to being, it's near perfect, just not quite there yet. And that's crazy to say for a show that's really only been on stage for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Like I don't even know. It's not that long. It's a very short
so much
out of 10 process.
So much of the rating is based on just like how I felt after leaving, like just how I was like impacted, and just like how much I want to see it again. Like it's not even, again, like I said, not scientific, but it's just like cannot wait to see this again. Cannot wait to tell everyone else to listen to this and watch this. And yeah, not perfect, but in such good shape.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our thoughts on Gatsby and American Myth, and it's now time for our obsession of the week.
Wow, my obsession, we're going to pull it together because obviously Mr. Ben Levi Ross starred in The Great Gatsby as Nick Carraway, and he also starred recently in The Connector at, where was it? I don't remember. MCC?
I think so.
Okay. Which is it's The Connector. It is a brand new Jason Robert Brown musical. It was off Broadway, and it's about this like literary magazine called The Connector that Ben Levi Ross's character Ethan goes to work at, and kind of has successes at this magazine because he is, pitching and writing these great like human interest stories, but his journalistic integrity is kind of called into question. We're talking about like fact checking in this musical, and whether he's sacrificing the fact checking in order to tell the more fantastical, more interesting, or more publishable story, and kind of the ethics of that. I think that's what this musical is dealing with. So really, really fun stuff in this musical. One of, big Jason Robert Brown generally. And I think this is like a top-notch Jason Robert Brown score. You really hear him. I think that's one of my favorite things about Jason Robert Brown is that you hear him in every musical that he writes. Like you can immediately tell that's him in that piano and everything. And for me, my favorite one was actually The Western Wall, which is right at the end. It's kind of a big production number. It almost has like Middle Eastern inspiration to it, probably based on the story that he's telling. I wasn't paying too closely attention to every single word, but Ben Levi Ross, I think, sounds really good on this. So go listen to this to get a bit of a taste of his current vocal health, if you will. And then also listen to this cast recording in general, because I think it's really fun stuff. Even the song with Max Crumb, which is called Success, about like a Scrabble master, is so fun. The Voice of My Generation is great. But yeah, for me, my favorite was The Western Wall. It feels like really strongly powerful. Like this production number of one of the stories that he's writing about is the one I would recommend to listen to this time.
Charlotte McInnes knows The Connector. She sang it in front of us.
She did at the autograph line, if you will.
Because we were the only two people there. My obsession this week is also kind of to like round out the dueling Gatsbys here. Recently, Bonnie and Clyde was taped and released. I won't say how I watched it, but if you want to watch it, I actually don't know if this one, I think it will still be available. But BonnieandClydeLive.com, you can buy tickets to like get a streaming link. There's an ad-free and an ad-supported. The ad-free is obviously more expensive than the ad-supported. I say this every time I see something that's well done, but like, why aren't we taping more things? And I know that the reason is because it's very expensive and getting cameras in theaters is very difficult. But for a case like this, yes, go ahead.
So much is taped in the UK because it's a lot cheaper, including this, which is really, really interesting. Anyway, go on. But I find it super interesting that a lot of the stuff we see taped is from the UK.
I will say this is also not a fully staged production, but it is basically a fully staged production, which was to Jeremy Jordan's surprise, because when he signed up for this, he thought it was just a concert taped reading. Anyway, if you've listened to the podcast since we've started the podcast, you'll know that we both are actually big fans of the Bonnie and Clyde cast recording and some of like really, really fun songs. I was saying to Steph the other day that I watched an interview with Jeremy Jordan, and this production is with Frances Maylie McCann, who did Bonnie for a while in the West End. It was supposed to be Laura Osnes, but she has not really resurfaced since her drama in 2020. But Jeremy was saying that a lot of the actors had to put in, or all of the actors like donated portions of their paychecks to get that cast recording made. And I literally don't know that this show would have ever had a life if that cast recording wasn't made. Like, people began to be like, they got obsessed with it because of the cast recording. It became almost like a cult musical. Like, we've obviously never seen it, but I love so much of that music, and to think that like it's due to the cast that was made is pretty crazy. It was that cast 10 album years ago.
And whatever's on YouTube of behind the scenes stuff, because I remember there was like rehearsal a fair room amount of behind the scenes stuff. There was
it's so interesting because like social media marketing like wasn't really a huge thing then. It was also just like interesting to hear Jeremy talk about it in general, because he said that when he got the role for this, he hadn't been in Smash yet. So like he kind of was an unknown. They were both unknowns like at the time. When did he do Newsies?
So he had done Paper Mill before, but on Broadway after. So like it fit in. The Broadway production was between, but there was an out of town for Bonnie and Clyde too. I think they were pretty simultaneous.
Because he was saying that like the only thing that he had done on Broadway was that he was an understudy in West Side Story
and Rock of Ages. Like he had just covered.
He didn't even mention that.
he had just covered roles. He hadn't had lead roles yet. He was like the matinee Tony, like the standby, and had done Rock of Ages again, understudying, but not. This was his first like Broadway principal role, and then it was Newsies the same season.
Yeah. So anyway, all this to say, the tape production is out. It's very well done. To hear Jeremy sing these songs 10 years later and still sound the way that he sounds, his voice does not age. He's really vocally healthy. I'm gonna pick a song. We've picked songs before. I think like the standout number is the Act 1 finale. We should have talked about this on our Act 1 finales episode, but like Raise a Little Hell is such a good
Raise a Little Hell.
Act 1 finale. But the song that I'm going to choose for the purpose of this is Too Late to Turn Back Now. I forgot about the song until I watched it again, and it's like, it really shows you the messed up relationship between Bonnie and Clyde in this number, and you're like, wow, these two should really never be together, but also like, I love watching their love story. So maybe very similar to Daisy and Gatsby should never be together, but I also enjoy watching their love story. But yeah, that's our episode on Gatsby. It's now done. We're, again, as I said, closing the Gatsby chapter. But if you want to listen to our other Gatsby episode, if you've seen this version and also want to compare it, you can do that by subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment. And if you've seen this, let us know, because we need people to talk to about it.
Like, let's get a conversation going in the comments here. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Off2BOA Podcast, and on TikTok at Off2Broadway, both with the number 2.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.